Yo boys, back with another video. Today we're going to be doing a good old-fashioned tier list. Now this is an overall tier list, so this is not just twos, threes. This is going to be like the overall. Now in RBG is a little bit different, but we're going to try to do the best we can with this. Now, before we start this, I'm going to be putting at sub rogue at this level. Now, if you're an overall player and you're not a really good player, it's an A tier spec. If you're a really good player, it's an S tier spec. That's basically every rogue spec ever. Same thing like Feral Druid and pretty much every burst. If you're a bad like if you're a casual player and you're playing a burst setup spec, it's not gonna work out. But if you know what you're doing and you're landing CC and you're using your burst when you have CC, it's gonna be good. So Sub Rogue's gonna be an S tier. Outlaw Rogue's gonna be an A tier. Obviously, Outlaw Rogue is pretty good. If it had a little bit more consistent damage, it would be an S tier spec. But it's like it's focusing too much on burst damage, and then off your burst, you're literally doing like 40, 30, 30, like maybe like 40k DPS. Unless you get a really good rule, you're not able to kill anything. You're just literally doing nothing. Like the whole thing of Outlaw is resetting your burst. It's kind of like Sub Rogue. You can't do anything to your burst. That's how Outlaw is. But it's just like the burst isn't as good as a sub. Like when sub clicks burst, you're able to actually kill something. As an outlaw, if they just trade CDs on your burst, then it is what it is. So we're gonna go with Assassination Rogue. Assassination Rogue is gonna be an A tier spec, can easily be a B tier spec. Defensively, it's way weaker than these two, and then offensively, your burst is actually pretty good, but your consistent damage is again just it's really lacking. Uh, a lot of people have a really weird thing to where setup comps should always be the very top. So you should every spec in the game that requires a setup, so like a Frost DK, a Fire Mage, even so far as a Ret Paladin, a Windwalker, an MM Hunter, a Pharaoh Druid, a Enhancement Shaman, a Evoker Dev. So these classes require setups, and not only do maybe they don't even require setups, but they require you to only do damage on your burst. Maybe Dev can do a little bit off its burst, but everything else is pretty much just burst reliant. So classes that require burst reliant should always be above in a class that can just PvE and do nothing the entire game and still do unhealable damage. That's simple logic. If a class can do literally whatever they want the entire game, a burst class like if you're just using your burst off CD and they use this is how it is. This is not like I think everyone agrees or whoever doesn't agree with this doesn't play these set of classes. They play a PvE class. And that's where the bias is going. Because I've played PvE classes and I can realize how broken they are because you don't do anything. Now you might peel for your healer and do all the basics, but overall you're not having to do anything special. You're just PvEing a person down. But we're gonna go with the next class here. Warrior Arms Warrior is gonna be an S tier. Mainly Arms Warrior isn't even that strong. Like really, its burst isn't even that crazy. Now AoE wise, like in solo shuffle and stuff, like its blade storm and stuff, and its slice and dice to make it's pretty strong in that regard. But like overall, if you're hitting like one target, you're not doing much damage. Like on your burst, you're doing really good, okay damage, but then you're just heavy reliant on damp, and then that's when you shine. So that's why Druid is so good with a warrior because when it comes to the damp and these guys sharpen or they have mortal strike on you or mortal wounds, mainly a sharpen, because once you have sharpen on you at like 55, 60% dampening, you're unable to heal at all. And by the time you get low enough, it's like, oh wait, I'm already 6% damp, I can't heal. So you're literally just getting dampened, and then you just can't heal. That's why this comp is always the number one comp in the game, because Wrestler is always the meta for twos, and same with arms. But we're gonna go with Fury Warrior. That's gonna be a B tier. Overall, you have okay burst, but you don't have consistent damage. This is a reliant, consistent damage. It's not like arms. Arms is a heavy burst. It's like a set. It's like you have to have burst to do damage. Fury is not supposed to be like that. It's supposed to be more like a DH or like an Outlaw Rogue, to where it's like able to do consistent damage, but it literally just doesn't have that at all. So those classes that don't have consistent damage and when they try to give everyone unlimited burst, that's when this comes into play. It's like, okay, well, we're clicking burst, but these guys are getting burst the entire game. So how is that fair? That's basically the logic. So like if the burst wasn't as crazy, and let's say DH had consistent damage and then on its burst it just had a little bit more, then it would be it just has to be balanced out. You cannot be a PvE class and have unlimited burst damage. It just will never make sense. but that's the game. That's why the game's like questionable. And everyone's like nobody's playing. I mean, people are playing it, but it's definitely not as fun as it used to be. But then again, I'm a casual, so what do I know? I'm just trying to play for a few hours, log off, and call it a wrap. But we're gonna go with the next one here. We'll go with Pharaoh Druid. Pharaoh Druid is definitely an A tier spec. Now that there's the new bite build going around, you're basically hitting 300k bites. So if you're cycloning the healer, you basically do all the CC yourself. So basically, you're CCing the healer with Cyclone, and then you're running precog. So you can fake cast, precog, and then you stun. That's it. Now you can even go healers with it. So you don't even have to Cyclone. Like, let's say you can Cyclone the DPS and then go healer, you can do that too. And if you're playing with a priest with Mind Games and PI and Dark Arc, you're getting a lot of damage out. So definitely an A tier spec. At first I was gonna say it's a B tier. Overall, honestly, I still think see, the thing is, in like threes, it dies pretty quick, but again, it does a lot of damage. But in two's guard, it's pretty good actually. In three's regard, it's good with jungle, and then in solo shuffle, it's not really good. There's just too much damage going out. So overall, I think it's not in the category of B tier. I think it's honestly an A tier. So I'm gonna keep it there. I don't think it's in. I don't think it's as bad as Fury Warrior. I think Fury is like literally unplayable. Like it's playable obviously, but it's like it's not even worth. It's like too much effort to just get literal rewards. We're gonna go with Boomy. Boomy overall is definitely an A tier spec. Um, honestly, it could even be an S tier spec to be honest. You have the CC. I think the one thing that Druids always lack is their defensive CDs. Boomy has zero defensives, and that's what makes it awful. It's in defensive purposes. Same thing with Fear Druid. Defensively, it's not good, but overall, it's good. Like it has CC, it has damage. It is like if you're getting focused by two melees or even one melee, it's like you're literally just sitting there the entire game. You're never coming out. Even if you do come out, if you get stunned out of form, you're literally getting 140 in like 3 seconds. So it's good if you're playing with like double caster, but overall wise, I'd put it as A tier. Let's see the next one here. Let's start with Mage. Fire Mage is gonna be an overall B tier. Again, it just dies too quick. Specs like these that are burst heavy, if it had the burst that it needed, it would need a lot more. For this spec to be viable, um, it would honestly, it has to have one thing. It either has to have survivability or huge burst damage. You have to have one or the other. So like when Glass Cannon used to like kill somebody in 3 seconds, that's how this would have to be with how fast these guys die. And that's why it's really, unless you're like very good, it's just not fun. You're just dying in two goes, and in two goes, you're either getting lucky killing them in the opener facing like 2K players, or you're just losing. So it just depends on the player, but mainly it's a B tier spec. Frost Mage is definitely an A tier spec. Overall, you have a lot of burst damage. Now, you do have to be a decent Frost Mage. Like, usually these Frost Mages will play with, like, Demolocks, just any double caster, really, and it'll work out. So, overall, it's definitely good, but it's not, like, S tier yet. Arcane Mage, again, an A tier spec. You have survivability, you have pretty good burst damage. You don't have consistent damage, but you have burst. It's kind of like what Fire Mage should be, except without Glass Cannon. Pretty much. So, we're going to put that as A tier. Fire is definitely worse than the worst spec out of, like, the mages here. So, the next one we're going to go with, Lock. Lock, again, is going to be an A tier. The mainly reason that these are A tier instead of S tier is because melees control, like, melees they just buffed them enough to where everyone's queuing a certain melee, and the melees are able to run down these certain people. Like if you have a warrior, a windwalker, a DH, a rep paladin, really any melee that's like not a rogue wise, maybe like assassination rogue with Shiv, like on top of another melee, something like that. These guys just can't do anything. Unless you're playing very well and you have a good healer, you're not having fun. Overall, class wise, it's good, but it's definitely not S tier good. So I'm doing this overall. So remember, this is specifically like PvP. This is in general how the class is, everything all together. So I'm gonna try to do as best I can here. But for the next one, oh wait, let's go with Destrolic. Destrolic is definitely an S tier spec. Overall, you're hitting insanely hard damage. Now in twos is the one thing that is if you're playing very well and you have a good druid that's stunning when you need him to stun on your damage, obviously not many very much druids that play this comp, and if you're a good druid, then you need to be in comms and your lock needs to tell you when to stun. That way you're not just stunning off DR, because there's certain times to where, oh, he gets a proc off his immolate and he has a lot of extra dam, and that's when you want to stun where he has a bunch of damage. Not just, I mean, it's good to stun off DR, but it's also not, especially if you know he has burst coming up in like 5 seconds. So overall, it's definitely an S tier. It's good in every regard. So definitely a good spec. I would definitely check it out. And that'll be, oh wait, Demolock. Demolock's definitely an A tier spec. Demolock's just insanely annoying. I think the one thing it lacks is uh they made this spec kind of like burst damage. The thing is it, if you just use one CD and you line, then you're pretty much fine. The reason this spec is even viable is because of its control. It literally can peel your entire team by itself every single go. So it's mainly just because of its control that it's like it's literally just annoying. So if it didn't have the control, or if it, I mean, it has decent damage, but again, it's not like crazy. It's just mainly the control. It's just overall, it's good. For the next one here, we're gonna go with Elisham. Elisham's definitely gonna be an A tier. Again, Elisham's really easy to play. And overall, you're not doing much. You're flame shocking, you're waiting for your procs, and then you're earth shocking, and that's really it. It's a 3 button rotation, and even if you do your rotation wrong, it doesn't matter. As long as you're putting up flame shocks and you're just clicking earth shock whenever it pops up and just casting instable, as long as you're not casting, then you're doing good. And a caster spec should never be like that. A caster spec should always have to cast. So caster specs like that don't have to cast and they're doing unlimited damage, that's the problem with the game. You should never just sit there and be able to kill somebody without having to actually click anything and have any skill involved. But especially as a caster, obviously, it's literally said like they're meant to be a caster for a reason because they cast. So next one we're gonna go with Mistweaver. Mistweaver overall is an S tier, and RBG's the best healer spec in the game. Overall, Fist Weaving's really good. Mistweaver overall is really good. The only rebuttal that this has is Wrestle Druid. It's probably above everything, but you know, it's definitely an S tier, so I'm gonna put it there. Windwalker an S tier spec. Now, in RBG wise, it's probably not an S tier spec because they're just gonna focus you and probably like literally take you out of the game in probably the first 10 seconds of the game. That's usually what happened every time I played my Windwalker back in Shadowlands and I did RBGs. I'd literally go out there and every time I queued RBGs with any Windwalker, they would focus that guy immediately. And it's probably the same now. But overall, it's definitely, you have huge burst damage, and yeah, it's really good. So definitely an S tier spec. Next one, we're going to be going with the good old fast Shaman. Shaman, overall, I think it's an A tier spec. Um, I think it's honestly really good. So I honestly think that H-Pal is better than Wrestle Shaman. I also think H-Pal is also better than Holy Priest. And I also think H-Pal is probably better than Evoker Healer. Maybe Evoker Healer is maybe a little bit on top of it. But I played H-Pal, and once you have full, I mean, I don't have full gear, but if you play H-Pal correctly, it's really good. The only reason H-Pal is like talked bad about is because it faces the S tier specs. So if you're, these are just overtuned. These need a nerf. Like these classes are good. They're just getting overtuned. Like the only way to counter react this is either nerfing these or making these all overtuned. That's what you'd have. You'd have to make every healer overtuned and all equal to be overtuned. So it'd be kind of confused. It'd be just every class is being overtuned pretty much. So what do I want to start off? We're gonna go with H or we start with Shaman, so we'll end off with Shaman here. So Wrestle Shaman A tier spec, Enhancement Shaman B tier spec. Now if you're getting really good procs, you're easily able to one shot. But again, this is all based off procs. If you get a proc, you're absolutely gonna decimate. But overall, I mean, you're dying really quick, and you're not getting procs like an insane amount. If you are, it's like one game worth, and it's like maybe you're getting just insane RNG one game, and the next game you're just getting none, and you're doing no damage, and you're just throwing for your team, and it's not really your fault. It's just how this class is designed, because it doesn't really have a burst dam. It's just literally, oh well, if I get a proc, then we win. So definitely not the best spec, but not the it's probably, yeah, one of the worst. But Frost DK again, another spec that is honestly pretty good. So I'm kind of thinking about putting it at A tier. In solo shuffle, it's really good. In threes, it's really good because you put this with a DH or a Windwalker or an Evoker, these can all work out. So like, I'm gonna put it as A tier because I don't think it's anywhere near as worse as these. At least DK has huge burst damage, and you have overall CC. You have silence. You have your AOE stun that stuns everything. You have your disorient. You have your grips. You have your perma chains. You have long range kick. So overall, it's definitely not bad. The only reason this would be bad is in twos, where it requires you to have consistent. Twos is a heavy required non-burst. So classes that don't have consistent damage aren't going to be the best. The reason Windwalker is because it has really good burst. But like the reason DH is really good and like BM Hunter and stuff like that is because it has a lot of consistent burst. Consistent burst will control because everyone plays with the rest of it because it's obviously the most overtuned spec that there's ever been. It doesn't have to play the game even still after the nerf. But that's just how that is. So I'm gonna put Frost DK here. Unholy DK again, A tier spec. Not an S tier quite, but it definitely has the dam. Now it's still probably missing. I think again they're focusing too much on burst dam and not consistent. This spec is not supposed to be required to be. This is just to have a little bit of burst damage. This is supposed to be overall like a DH, a little bit below a DH, but it's way below a DH. So the problem with Frost DK or DK in general is Frost DK is all about your burst. Unholy DK is supposed to be consistent. They made this class a reliant off burst, and when you do that to a spec, it makes it bad because this is meant to be an overall. Like you can't design a spec to be consistent damage and switch it all of a sudden. Oh wait, we're gonna switch into a Frost DK real quick. Hold up, it doesn't work unless you're giving them huge consistent damage. Otherwise, it's never working out. Yeah, it just doesn't work out, and that's just how that goes. Next spec here, obviously I'm trying to talk about why the spec is not as good or why is it. So I don't know how long this video. I don't really care. I just make content. I haven't been doing much. I mean, I've done carries, but I haven't played Rogue. I think Rogue is just. I'm 2400 in solo shuffle. I'm waiting almost an hour of a queue, and it's not worth it. I don't have the time to just sit there and wait for a queue, and then I can't get teammates for LFG, and I'm not waiting 45 minutes for one group that has decent experience just for them to be some like, you know, just trash. I don't know. So overall, I'm just trying to do carries. I'm trying to cap my characters, wait for inflation, and then see what's goody. But that's just how that's going. So next spec, we're gonna go with DH. DH is an obvious in S tier spec. It's good in every regard. You should have a DH in everything, even whether it's a solo shuffle, threes, twos, RPGs, everything. It's all S tier in, so it's very good. So next spec here, Survival Hunter, definitely an okay spec. It has pretty good damage. The problem with this spec is it should be the difference between this is a burst spec. So when this clicks its CDs, it needs to be like a Windwalker. And then off its CDs, it shouldn't be doing much. Again, they made it into a consistent to where now it does okay consistent damage, but then on its burst, it's just too required to be. You can't have a consistent damage class be based off burst. It doesn't work. So every time they try to do that, it always makes the class just worse in every regard. So until they learn, these classes just will never be above those other classes. So Beam Hunter is definitely an S tier. We don't even have to talk about that. Overall, it's good in everything. The only thing that this may not be good in is like RBGs, but even then, you could just sit your pets and sit like I'm pretty sure they used to do this in Shadowlands where they put their pets all the way up here, and I don't know if you can still run that pet. It's probably they probably took that out of the game, but there used to be a worm pet that you sit by the flag, and then you'd have the BM hunter or a hunter in general, I think, go across the map and hide all the way over here, and its pet would just come out of the ground and do an earthquake, and you'd never be able to kill it, and you'd never be able to get that base unless you killed the hunter. Obviously, I don't know if that's still a thing, but in general, it's definitely an S tier spec. So my bad, I need a drink here. Next spec here, we're gonna go. Let me put these here real quick. Okay, so the next spec, what did I do? Okay, we still missing MM. MM Hunter, definitely an A tier spec. It has burst damage. Um, the thing I think with MM Hunter, honestly, is again it made it too reliant off of your consistent damage. So they made it to where it's like, okay, well, on your consistent damage, you're still gonna do pretty good damage. But again, this needs to be a class that can literally kill you in 3 seconds or below every burst go. It just has to be. Because by the time this guy has burst, you're gonna have every 2 minute CD back up. So every time he bursts, you're gonna trade with your 2 minute CD. And then by the time he gets to do anything, that it's gonna counter react each other. That's why these classes just aren't as good as these classes. And this is like that's just how that goes. Ret Paladin, definitely an A tier spec. Don't even really have to talk about that. You have pretty much everything you need. I think the one thing that you would need more is maybe cancel out a CD or two. Maybe make sack 2 minutes. Maybe don't give Rets land hands, or you need to like balance it to where they're not having unlimited CDs and unlimited burst. So Rets shouldn't obviously Rets don't really do any damage off the burst, but I think they need a little bit. They should be able to kill you in a Hajj on the wings. If they full Hajj you and you sit the full Hajj without clicking anything, like a big defensive cooldown, you deserve to die 100% 2-0 in 5 seconds max. And it can't do that unless it gets really lucky crits and you're like really leather. Overall, though, it's really good. Rest of Druid is obviously an S tier spec. Holy Priest. Honestly, Holy Priest is questionable. I think Holy Priest isn't that bad. I'll put it as A tier, honestly. I think Holy Priest is still playable, but again, these S tier specs are just so much higher. So, like, Disc Priest is going to be an S tier spec. Now, this is overall, obviously. When I played Disc in solo, I actually just AFK'd out. I was like, bro, I'm done with it. But once you get it down, I mean, I'm back up to like 1900. Obviously I'm switching SP because I hate healing solo. The only healer that I'll play in solo is either Mistweaver or Restored. Otherwise, I'm just not healing solo. I'll just play, DPS. At least then it's like I'll wait the queue and then get off after that. I'm not gonna like queue healer and then get no rewards out of playing at like 2400 MR at like 500 CR. So I'm gonna pass with all that. Evoker healer is definitely an A tier spec. And H-Power is definitely an A tier spec. SP, A tier spec. These are really easy to like pick. Mainly because, I mean, Holy Paladin is actually really good. You have unlimited CDs. And the only reason this dies is if you're out of LOS. So you could heal as an H-Power all the way up to 60% damp pretty much the entire game. Like every time I've healed as an H-Power at any MMR, I have always healed to about 60%. Like when you guys saw my last video, every game I played when we went like 12-0, all the way up to like 2350 MMR on my last games, I was facing wrestlers and I was able to heal as long as they were. So I'm able to heal. The problem is my mana. I can't just go and get a drink. Like I'm not able to just to do that. He's just able to like run over and hit me in the mouth. He can just racial and drink. By the time I get out of combat, he's already on me again. That's the reason that like the mana on H-Power is really bad. But overall, it's still really good. So Dev Evoker definitely an A tier spec. A lot of A tier specs in this. So these are definitely playable, and they're not bad. They're just not an A tier. They're not an S tier. And then Og is gonna be the worst spec in the entire game. So the reason is it's a support class, but the thing is, it needs some type of damage. You have to give this class consistent damage. Don't give it burst damage. Give it consistent. So don't give it insane consistent, but it needs enough. It should be doing easily 50k minimum DPS and then maybe like 70k DPS max for like their crits. And that should be a consistent damage on top of them having as much utility. Maybe if they pop their burst, let them do like 100k DPS, like max. Like the tiptoe of like the full crit, if you're running a full mastery, would be 100k. That would be perfectly fine. But overall, let me know what you guys think about this tier list. Looking over everything real quick. Sometimes there's stuff that I'd switch out, but I think this looks pretty good to me. There could be some stuff that'd be switched out, but overall, I think it's fine. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. And obviously comment for the algorithm because it helps out the YouTube video. And let me know what you guys want to see next. Otherwise, enjoy the video, and I'll see you guys in the next one.